ready to go on our end.
Thank you, Rusty. I will call to order City Council special meeting and work session Thursday, February 4th, 2021. Need our approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't believe we have any public comment.
We
I'll
have
ask
one.
Yeah, actually we did, Sam.
Okay, Jennifer?
So Rusty, do you have John Francis?
Yes. Let me mute him. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hi,
Yes.
John. Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks. I'm just started my timer for 3 minutes. Dear presiding officer, city council, mayor, staff, members of the public. I am a guest of PO Box 1154, Cannon Beach, Oregon, 97110. I wanted to thank you for allowing me to address you all. Just we're on the public time, so just gonna be try and quick here. Just wanted to say first, so thanks so much for all the hard work through these extremely difficult circumstances. I first had the opportunity to visit Cannon Beach 10 years ago. Didn't really pay attention to what was going on. And in that time, I see now that you're drafting plans to mitigate the level X UGAMI, I guess, rating that Cannon Beach is situated in, and talking about these capital improvement projects regarding the water and wastewater. And as I've only been in Cannon Beach in little spurts of time and haven't been able to really kind of, study it. But from afar, I've been quite impressed, and I'm just super grateful of how everyone from a staff, city council, mayor, citizens, and alike, how everyone has come together in these extremely difficult circumstances. So my only question is, I've just been observing, the federal government passing these extraordinary pieces of legislation, and you're talking about these incredible capital improvement projects that are going to be tremendous. And I'm just wondering, as your staff and city council and the like are so diligent with public funds and managing and talking about these rate increases over a decade, more or less, of the water and the wastewater utility fees. And my only question is this: now we're in, I guess, in the national perspective, just going to negotiate this final bill, which I believe is the first one that will have state and local funding. I know that the CARES Act had some municipal funding. I didn't know how that was divvied out on a local basis in the state of Oregon. And I know that there's going to be communities in great need, and I'm not. So my only question is, as you do this great work session, incredible special session right now, is there any kind of eye on, because if you look at your phase 2 and your phase 3 of these great projects, they're kind of more down the pike. And so as we look at these pretty big capital investments coming down the line, is there any opportunity for federal funding for these projects? Because, as we've seen, I believe Cannon Beach has been deeply restorative for a lot of visitors throughout the years, especially in this time of this pandemic. I need to end my comment now because I've taken so much of your time. I greatly appreciate the work session and hearing me out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Francis. This is Bruce St. Dennis, city manager. And yeah, we're absolutely on top of the possibilities for grants, et cetera, for this. You'll hear tonight that our Public Works Director, Karen Labate, has been working on getting plans in place. What we saw after the Great Recession is that in order to try to jumpstart the economy some, the federal government was very generous with grants for infrastructure projects. So during her presentation, you'll hear that we have been talking to people associated with the federal government. They're excited about some of our projects. And like I said, we are positioning ourselves for they would come along and say, anybody with infrastructure projects that are shovel ready, we have funding, and we are trying to be one of those communities. So thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay. Let's go straight into our topic.
Sam,
Yeah.
Carolyn wants to make a comment.
Carolyn's hiding underneath the screen. Okay.
It was. Carolyn Crooks, PO Box 1495. As you all know, I did send you a comment. I hope you all had an opportunity to look at that. And I wanted to reiterate that the comment was a comment from me, not from me as a Public Works Committee member. The Public Works Committee over the past 4 or 5 months have been looking at the proposal that's going to be in front of you today. And although there were some concerns raised, Karen was very diligent in incorporating information from committee members as well as listening to the concerns that some of us had. So I just wanted to make it clear that I wasn't trying to undermine what the committee had done or what Karen has presented, but that the new information that was available with respect to the financing situation kind of changed some of my views. And that's where my comment came from. And I just wanted to acknowledge that I was not trying to undermine what Karen has put together. And I wanted to thank Bruce for the opportunity to come today and be part of the discussion and talk about options and, discuss the plans that you'll see today. Okay.
Thanks. If I can just thank you, Carolyn. And Carolyn is here by invitation because as often she finds herself in the middle of our projects. And so she worked with Lori on some of the financial information you're going to see coming up. So I did ask her to be here today, and I appreciate her, all she does for us, but also for coming tonight. So thank you.
Okay, then. Anybody else hiding under there? Okay,
There's a
then let's
couple.
dive right in. Bruce, you want to start us off?
Yes, if I can. Tonight, we will be opening the door on probably one of the hardest decisions. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, we need to do resolution first.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because we need to do the special meeting resolution. We'll close it and then go into work session.
Okay, all right. If
We can start with the Dogami resolution.
okay. Sam, do you have it in front of you?
I do, but I lost track of where I am because I put it on the wrong thing. Hang on.
I can just give you a quick update.
Okay,
This is the resolution that you guys asked for at our last meeting. Jeff put together some language and we also looked at some language other cities have put together requesting the state to continue Dogami. We do have some changes from the resolution that was in the packet. Mike noticed a few revisions, and so I've made those. They're on the dais. They're pretty small. I changed the word. We changed the word to helping. And then the number 1, I didn't complete that sentence. And so now number 1 reads, the council proclaims Dogami essential to coastal resilience, emergency and disaster preparedness. Further, the city council of Cannon Beach fully supports Dogami and asks that Dogami be fully funded and empowered to continue its vital work on the Oregon coast.
very
Thank you.
good. I know that I do want to proceed with this, but I also know that the legislature has dropped it already because of the input that's been forced on them, or the governor's office did. I'm not sure what the legislature was doing.
Yeah.
But let's proceed.
Would you like to proceed with the completing the resolution or start the other meeting?
Let's complete the resolution so we can
Anxious today. You're just anxious tonight.
Are you ready for a motion?
yeah,
I move to adopt resolution 21-08 for the purpose of declaring support for the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, Dogami, as essential to resilience efforts in Cannon Beach.
Second,
seconded. Any last questions, comments? Okay, Jennifer?
Sorry, I was typing and not paying attention. Councilor Risley,
yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy,
Yes.
Council President Benefield,
Yes,
Mayor Stidel.
Yes. Thank you all. Let's send that off and then I'll close the special meeting and now we can go into where I was, the utility project and rate discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we're opening the door on one of the toughest decisions you probably have to make as a city councilor. Like most folks would understand, our utility system has reached an age where it needs more maintenance. On the other hand, our utility rates have not collected for replacement projects. And if we want those improvements to occur, they will need to be funded at least initially by rates paid by our citizens. I say initially because there are other options for raising revenues for projects like this that have been discussed in the past, but they will take a considerable amount of time for them to be implemented. Staff recommends moving more quickly than waiting for one or more of these options to be in place so the city can take advantage of historically low interest rates. It's also part of a strategy to position ourselves for potential opportunities for grants in infrastructure projects funded by the federal government, stimulate the economy. It was done after the Great Depression and more recently after the Great Recession. And we are starting to see trends of that now. Public Works Director Karen Labonte will talk about the city's water and wastewater master plans that were commissioned in 2015. She'll also talk about staff's recommendation regarding the next phase of projects from those master plans. Finance Director Lori Sawry will talk about how she worked with Carolyn Probst again to harness the city's utility rate tool to drill down how rates would need to change to support the project list and schedule as recommended by staff. I want to emphasize that the projects, schedule, and funding methodologies that are recommended by staff are our best effort to achieve the goal of stabilizing our utility systems. The City Council will be taking input from numerous other sources before their final decision is made. So thank you for taking the time tonight. And before we get started, does anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, we'll, Karen, if you would go ahead and start your presentation, please.
You bet. I would like to say that I appreciate Carolyn's comments, and as a staff member of the city here, I look at our committees as an extension of staff. I know they're advisory committees, but the goal is to have a good relationship where we can come to a consensus and come together in a forum like this, giving you our best recommendations as a team. And that's not always an easy process to go through because it's important decisions involving a lot of money. But I think the Public Works Committee as a whole has done a fantastic job, and I very much appreciate the support that I get from that group of folks particularly. We did a lot of amendments, nobody's fault but my own. I worked with our lovely city manager here, and we reduced your presentation from 8 pages to 20, and you should have that. You should have that current copy. And we added some maps and things that I think will lend itself to our discussion a little bit more. So I'm going to start off by just kind of setting the stage for what we're going to talk about. The projects being discussed tonight were identified based on numerous factors. The most obvious factors, I think Bruce covered in his response to some of the public comments, but I'd like to highlight a few other factors that contributed to the decision-making in bringing these projects to you. Beyond the discussion and collaboration with the staff and the committee, we had several outside engineering firms that assisted with not only creating our master plans, but they assisted in vetting the numbers that are in the master plan. Before we bring any projects to you, we always do some level of pre-engineering to make sure that the money that we're asking for is accurate. And there's always going to be some fluctuations of materials and things, but with some pre-engineering efforts, we can refine those numbers pretty tight. So that's what you'll see tonight. That process has happened. The other part of the process, and probably the most important part at this stage, were considerations based on funding opportunities that had come our way. And you heard the gentleman speak earlier about the vast amount of federal funding that is available. Most of that funding comes with specific qualifiers. And as you know, we've been working with the Business Oregon team, and that's made up of folks from OHA, Oregon Health Authority, and the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. And it's under the direction of the Oregon State Governor. And that's where that money is controlled and disseminated, is through that team. And so that's a very time-consuming process. It takes countless staff hours and efforts and extensive paperwork and application process associated with vetting the projects that might qualify for consideration and funding award. As you also know, the funding opportunities were not always pursued in the past. And I can say, based on my personal experience chasing these opportunities over the past 3 years, I have developed an appreciation for why that might have been the case. The various funding sources come with very specific project qualifiers, as I mentioned. They typically do not support maintenance type work. So it's usually enhancements, upgrades, the improvement of your infrastructure. These are also very competitive loans. So as a small city like Cannon Beach, it's hard for us to compete with someone like Portland, Hillsborough, that has much larger population, unless our projects hit multiple pulse points of the qualifiers for those loans. So those are the projects we'll talk about tonight. What also what allowed some of these projects that we'll discuss tonight to qualify for the 1% low interest, 50% principal forgiveness type loans that we're going to be talking about is those qualifiers. Not only our projects support critical infrastructure that allows us to get water to town, move sewage safely, but they're also identified in our master plan as being necessary for a critical path to recovery post-event. As you know, the SRAMP was a last-minute addition that the state made mandatory for all cities with master plans. And so that had the seismic element that was required as part of our master plans. And when I speak of event, I mean any kind of event, and especially a critical event. This includes upgrades in our technology and the backup generators that impact the functions at our pump stations, water lines from our springs on down, and the tanks that hold water critical to the citizens should we have an event. And lastly, the ability to demonstrate that we have redundancy, which we do not have now, that will reduce the impact an event could have on our ability to recover quickly and restore services to the community, such as the line proposed along Highway 101. Also the line that we restored on the S-curves last year, where we did not have redundancy and we restored that line. These are just a few of the key factors in vetting the projects in the master plan for the coming budget year and beyond. But at the end of the day, it's not about any specific project as much as it is the fact that we've completed all the low-hanging fruit within the master plans. We're at a point where no matter what project we put on the table before you for consideration, it will require a rate increase to move forward. Ultimately, it is up to you. We can pass on these funding opportunities, or we can pursue them in an effort to achieve the biggest bang for our buck with the funds awarded. These funds, along with other funding considerations, will minimize the burden on the shoulders of our utility ratepayers. Either way, staff stands ready to modify the plan and implement as you desire. If you'll turn to page 1 of the presentation in front of you, past a cover page. I'm not going to get deep into this because I think all of you understand what master plans are. Basic highlight is there a snapshot of our water and wastewater utility system during that time frame that the master plan is generated for. They provide capital projects and vision for that time period. It's required by the Oregon Health Authority and the Department of Environmental Quality. And the revenue is largely derived on utility ratepayers. Going to page 3. This is the SRAMP that was added just before we completed our master plans. The state added an additional requirement for all cities to have a SRAMP. This stands for Seismic Risk Assessment and Mitigation Plan, and it has to be part of your official master plan. The city of Cannon Beach has been identified as a level X on the Dagami, Oregon plate number 7 for earthquake and tsunami damage. This is the highest risk category for damage in the state. This is because of our location. We would become somewhat of an island in any kind of a major catastrophic event. We have aging infrastructure. We are at a very low elevation, and it is identified that likely our infrastructure would be significantly compromised, if not catastrophically destroyed. The 2013 Oregon Resiliency Plan has set a 50-year planning goal for cities to attain the capability to restore critical services within a 1-week period after an earthquake, tsunami event, and to be able to restore all services within 3 to 6 months. It is recognized that services will be considerably more difficult for coastal communities to restore and could take up to 3 or more years to restore complete services after a seismic event. The next page highlights the projects that were identified as a result of the SRAMP, and those will be addressed as I get more into the projects in the following pages. Anybody that would like to have details around the projects that we speak about tonight, there are page numbers that you can find when you go to our master plan. It'll tell you what page those projects are on. So it makes it easy for you to look in the master plan that's available for the public to get the nature behind the projects. You'll turn to page 5. This is just a project status of where we currently are. If you recall back in March 10th, the work session, Windsor Engineering came and gave you a presentation on our capital projects that we discussed. They took a look of our entire master plan and gave another perspective of our capital projects that we had outlined and also the cost associated with those projects. So that was our first pass at doing some vetting for the projects we felt we wanted to move forward. We also made the decision, as we shared with you, to not change what's in the master plan so that when we do things and look backwards, we can tie the original master plan with where we are in the projects. Instead of making modifications, we felt that it would be difficult for us to track it from the original master plan. So from a water perspective, we have 34 total projects identified at approximately 17.3 million. 10 of those projects have been completed as of today, and we have one that is currently in motion, which is noted on the plan there, the AMA upgrades. That's our meter module change out that the water team is in the middle of right now. We're about 32% into that. The funding was secured last year. This was another one of those 1%, 50% forgivable, principal forgivable loan. And the target date for completion is June of this year. For wastewater, we had a total of 11 projects identified at approximately $6.4 million. 4 of those projects have been completed to date. One is on its way towards completion. That is the Matanuska Pump Station. We got another low interest, 30%, 50% principal forgiveness loan to put a cover over that. That cover is badly needed to cover the assets that we have out there. Our generator is currently rotting in place. We need to get that replaced, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We replaced a major transformer out there last year, and that's sitting out in the elements. And as you know, Matanuska Pump Station is in front of the Stephanie Hotel, which is right on the ocean front. So next page 6. This is it's difficult to put a map on the screen and show you the whole town, but this is a snapshot of from one end to the other of our town. It shows you where our 3 water tanks are located. The tank on the south end here that you see on the Priso is our largest tank. It's 1.6 million gallons. It is a steel tank. It's down at the south end of town near Tolovana. The tank in the middle is called our main reservoir. That is our concrete tank. It is a 1 million gallon tank that sits below the Springs Road. So where our springs are, that is the lines that we will talk about tonight that we're proposing replacement. And then lastly, our north tank, which many of the council members live on the north end of town. That's our 30-gallon tank, and it is a steel tank. So our main reservoir is the only tank that is not steel. It is a concrete tank. The next slide kind of gets into the path of the projects that concern this map. Phase 1 project proposed, you gave us money last year for this project. That is the $45,000 to be able to evaluate the current main concrete tank site and consider a new location if the proposal for a new tank at that location cannot be achieved. The $45,000 that you gave me will be to study that and to come back to council with the information that's going to help us make decisions concerning phase 3 that I'll get into in a minute. But we're ready to pull the trigger on that project right now. We have selected the engineering firm that's going to do that. The money's in the budget, and so I'll be pulling the trigger on that soon. The next bullet down is the 3 seismic valves. This one will go on each tank. What the seismic valve does is it protects the water inside the tank if we have an event. And an event doesn't necessarily mean an earthquake. If you'll remember, 2 years ago, we had a water line break on the north end of town. And when that happened, we lost pressure on the line and it emptied our tank. So the entire contents of that tank came down into town. And we had some flooding and some damage associated with that. If we had a seismic valve on that tank, that probably would not have happened. So that's an example of not everything is associated with an earthquake or a tsunami. The cost associated with that includes the seismic valves, the isolation valves, controls, the vaults, and the piping connections to complete that entire project. I'm proposing that to start this year, and it would complete in 22. Next would be the site improvement around the main reservoir, which is again our concrete tank. This is important. It's identified in the master plan because of the damage that could happen if that tank gives way. It's already identified in the master plan that the tank will most likely not survive a seismic event. But again, there could be other events that cause that tank to fail. The damage that we would be looking at are not only the surrounding homes, but the coaster property, which is where our Red Cross location is, our public works yard, where our secondary EOC is located if City Hall is not standing after an event, and all of our emergency equipment. It also would impact our RV park, which is our planned water distribution point for getting water to town after an event. So those areas could be damaged if this tank gives way. By making site improvements, the engineering firm feels that we could mitigate some of those impacts. The total cost of these projects, subtracting the $45,000, because that's already is $556,000. I can complete these projects in 10 months. This qualifies for a 50% principal forgiveness loan. Business Oregon is ready to give us these dollars today. You'll go to the next slide, which is slide 8. This slide breaks down each of our tank locations. The north tank, this is filled by the Ash Street pump station. That's how that tank is filled. And again, if the line between this side of town and across the bridge to that part of town were to be compromised, If we didn't have a seismic valve on that tank, then we wouldn't have water to the north end of town.
Wouldn't be able to refill either.
Correct. The South Talavana tank is fed from a pipe on the highway as well as our S-curve pipe that we put back in last year. And that's our 1.6 million gallon steel tank. So we have some redundancy for that location, thanks to the S-curve project. And again, the main reservoir, which is our concrete tank on the right-hand side, this is the route that's being proposed tonight for replacement. I'm going to point out a couple things to you. This is the area that's very concentrated with our Red Cross location, our Public Works yard, our EOC up there, so on and so forth. But we're proposing that from the springs level here, all the way down to our water plant, which is about midstream of this road here, down to the RV park. This is the tank. This is where our RV park's located. Our Public Works building is about right there. And we have Sunset Pump Station. So we have a cluster of areas around there that are critical. And the goal here is to replace that pipe. Some of it is our the old concrete transite pipe that is like China. It doesn't take a lot for that to spontaneously combust, if you will. And some of it is the old PVC pipe. And so to replace the lines from the springs down would enable us to address all the issues that I've highlighted for you tonight. It would also address our distribution point at the RV park. And with the site improvement around the tank, it would mitigate any impact of flooding until we've had our assessment of that site done to see what's realistic of replacing that tank with one behind it at that same location, or if it has to be somewhere different. Questions on any of the slides so far? Are you tracking with me on our locations there as far as our tanks and our lines? And okay, good. All right, so slide number 9. This gets into phase number 2. This is where we are talking about exactly what I just mentioned, the lines between the springs to the tank, to the water plant, and to the RV park. And this would fulfill our goal of trying to get water to town within 72 hours of a major event. Again, if any of these, we have no water to the city. This is different than some of our neighborhood lines that we have isolation valves that we can isolate a situation, and there may be a neighborhood that doesn't have water. With this route up here, the town doesn't have water. So the impact is much more significant. Existing pipes are anywhere from 50 to 70 years old, and they're made of either the old transite concrete asbestos pipe or old PVC pipe. Our proposal in this project is to replace it with the HDPE, that is high density polyethylene pipe. And this is often used to replace aging concrete. This is the pipe that we put up at the Ash Street water project that a lot of you watched us be able to put that pipe in. It's a high pressure tolerant pipe. It's a high level impermeability pipe, sorry about that, often used to transport fluid and gas. This price tag is 3.2 million. It could be done in 12 months. This project is also eligible for the 1% low interest 30% loan. And ultimately phase 3, and this is completely dependent upon the $45,000 assessment that we'll be pulling the trigger on. And this is the evaluation that'll be done on the current concrete tank site and the need for either a different location or to be able to do a new tank directly behind that. This also includes the redundancy line along Highway 101. The next slide, slide 10. again, highlights the route that I was talking about that in this project that we want to replace from the springs down to the main reservoir. We're talking this route right here from the springs all the way down. And again, this passes our water plant, takes it out to where the tank is, back to the tank, and down to the RV park was in this general area here. These slides are the projects in the master plan associated with the water projects. And again, the page numbers are noted there. So if anybody wanted to look those projects up and get more detail, that information's right there for you. Then if you'll turn to page 13, this gets us into wastewater. And wastewater is nothing like water. This map shows you our town again, end to end, and it shows all 9 pump stations. And so we're starting down here at the south end. My little cursor. Getting weird out.
Could you switch on?
Hit this twice.
Thank you.
Actually, the red dot.
Thanks. So down at the very south end, we have the Sitka pump station. Of course, then Midway, Siuslaw, so on, all the way down. If I get really technical on you guys, I'll get my cheat sheet here and tell you kind of how this flows. If we start at the other end here at the north end, I'll tell you, going from Ecola, this handles sewage north of 5th Street, and Ecola pumps all sewage to the main pump station, which is right here. Main handles all sewage south of 5th Street to Harrison, and the main pump station pumps all sewage to the treatment plant. Eckland, which is at the RV park, handles all sewage north of Elk Creek Road and east of Highway 101, and pumps all sewage to the Pacific pump station, which is right here. Pacific handles all sewage south of Harrison Street to Chenna, and the Pacific pump station pumps all sewage to the treatment plant. Haystack handles all sewage west of Hemlock between Nanana and Viewpoint Terrace, and Haystack pumps all sewage to the Pacific pump station. Next is Matanuska, handles all sewage south of Chenna to Fernwood Street. Matanuska pumps all sewage to the Pacific pump station. Siuslaw handles all sewage west of Hemlock, Siuslaw south to Coos Street, and Siuslaw pumps all sewage to Matanuska. Next is Midway, handles all sewage west of Hemlock, Orford Street south to Noatak, and Midway pumps all sewage to Matanuska. Sitka handles all sewage west of Hemlock, Sitka south to Logan Lane, and the Sitka pump station pumps all sewage to Matanuska. So that gives you your basic flow of sewage. You'll hear people refer to pump stations also as lift stations. They're one and the same. They lift sewage up, they pump sewage forward. So you'll hear it both ways. If that is a question for you, why people call it one way or another, I've heard it both ways. I've asked the same question.
Karen, what is the dashed line?
That's a main. That is a main. A force main. Next slide, page 14. This is where I'm going to get into each of the wastewater projects and the nature of those. First up is the Matanuska pump station. As you recall, this is where we had our overflow last July. And without reliving that consequence, I will just say that there are some improvements that are badly needed at that location. Some of those improvements we've been able to make using our operations funds. We secured a loan last year for a cover, as I mentioned. The architectural design is complete and the DRB team has approved that. I've noted the reasons why it's important for us to get a cover over the top of those assets there. The funding that I'm requesting in this project is funding for the upgrades of the control panel, which was part of our issue with the overflow, and the generator. And as I mentioned, our generator is rusting, sitting there in place. And it's important that we do this before we get the cover on it. I need to replace that generator before I cover the building. The engineering for the upgrades is currently underway. I managed to do that in this year's budget. And I'm also chasing FEMA grant money for 4 generators, one being this Matanuska generator. The cost of this project is $260,000. That includes the generator and the panel upgrades. Our current technology at this location is over 30 years old. The upgrades also move us towards SCADA platform that's identified in the master plan. And what SCADA does for us is gives us that remote monitoring and diagnostic capability. So we have some controls remotely, and that saves us critical time in being able to respond before an overflow actually occurs. I look at that kind of like a doctor can look at a set of x-rays or an MRI image as he's getting his clothes on, heading to the hospital to do surgery on us. You know, that's the way I look at a pump station. Next slide 15, is going to talk about the Haystack pump station. This shows you the location of Haystack. If you'll go ahead and go to slide 16. Haystack Pump Station is the only pump station that's located on private property. And if you remember, you gave me budget money last year to actually put a permanent generator at this site. And that project was delayed because the homeowner was in the middle of trying to sell his home. So he asked us to please not do the project. So we pulled the project back and we revamped what we would do there going forward to address the major maintenance upgrades that are badly needed. Also during that process, we discovered that we had no easement in place for the neighboring property, which we are required to access in order to do this project. So we had to get that easement put in place, and I'm happy to say we were successful in getting that. The upgrades that are planned is not only the control panel, but we have 100 feet of force main and 200 feet of gravity to put in there. The timing for this project is critical because of its location. Obviously, it's located on Pacific, which is near a beach access point, but it's a very narrow street. We've had to modify some of the parking down in that area simply because of emergency access for the beach access and us being able to get down to this pump station without so many cars on both sides of the street. We can't get a generator down there or whatever we happen to need, a Vector truck or whatever. Also needs to be done at the time of year when our flows are low for us to conduct this type of work. The ideal time would be late September and early October. So I bring you both of these pump stations because unlike Haystack, Matanuska can be done at a different time of the year. So it allows us to move forward on both of these pump stations that are in critical need for addressing these things. If we had an overflow at Haystack like we did at Matanuska, it would be just as catastrophic, if not worse. It is in front of our Haystack Rock location. The next page, page 17, highlights the location of Midway and Siuslaw, which I'll talk about next. Siuslaw location is just to the side of the Talavana Inn, and Midway is just south of that on Pacific. Page 18 highlights a little deeper what this is about. These are 2 of our last 4 pump stations that require us to manually roll out a generator. So putting permanent generators here obviously do exactly what I mentioned earlier. It saves us time and response time and being able to get out when there's been a failure. And in the event of weather, the generator automatically kicks on and it doesn't take one of our technicians to be out there to do that. They still would respond to the site. But when the generator kicks over and we get an alarm that the generator is kicked on, they have SCADA. They can look at what's going on. They have some control of what they can do remotely, and then they're responding at the same time. So they can do that via a tablet. They can do that via a laptop. It also saves us overtime and having the guys out in the middle of the night rolling a generator out when the winds are 60 miles an hour and it's raining sideways. We try to get in front of the weather and get these generators out in advance. But it's not unusual for us to have something occur that causes us to have to pull them out in the middle of the night unplanned. Both of the locations require building extensions in order to put the permanent generators at that location. I'm asking for engineering funds to be able to engineer these projects this budget year. Both of those pump stations can be engineered for $40,000. And then construction would occur the following year, which would be in the 22-23 timeframe. We have, again, vetted these numbers to make sure that they're accurate. And I've been told by 2 different contractors that it would be wise for us to bid these at the same time because they're small pump stations. Most likely we wouldn't get a lot of response on our bids if we had to do them one at a time because it wouldn't be cost effective for a contractor to come do these individually. So we put them together for that reason. Also saves us costs on the bid process because it costs us money to publicly bid these jobs. So we would save that if we did them both at the same time. The estimated cost on both of these pump stations is $260,000. And again, these are 2 of the generators that I'm chasing FEMA funding for. And I'd like to take a minute just to thank Rick Hudson, our emergency manager, because he worked with the county to get our natural hazard mitigation plan in draft, soon to be finalized. And if we did not have that, we wouldn't even have been able to chase this money because we wouldn't have qualified. We have to have that plan in place for us to even qualify for this FEMA funding. So thank you, Rick, for that. This FEMA funding is a 75-25 split. So that means FEMA covers 75% of it. The city would be on the hook for 25%. That doesn't necessarily have to be cash. They've given us what the qualifiers are that we could fulfill that 25%. And then behind that slide is the wastewater master plan projects that remain. And then I'll take you to my closing slide, which is slide 20. Again, the projects that we brought to you tonight, projects that the staff feels will address the most critical needs for this budget year and the years beyond. We've spread it over 2021 through 2026. And obviously, we've been aggressive about chasing additional funding, federal, state grants, to try to offset, the burden of the ratepayers. The federal money that we're chasing, the infrastructure funds that Bruce is talking about is above and beyond what I'm already chasing. It is also federal funding, but it hasn't been released to us yet. We have to get an invite letter saying the money is available for us to chase. So that money is still an option for us. And by giving me the engineering money that I'm asking for, puts these projects in a shovel-ready condition to where I could not only move forward with what you give me from a budget perspective and or our rates, but if that money comes in, I could still pursue those funds, and then we don't have to spend the budget money to do that. We've done that in other projects. We basically pay ourselves that and release the money back to the general fund. And that's it. Questions?
I'm just curious, when you say, I just for understanding, when you say that, for instance, the water and the shrimp at 556,000 qualifies for a 50% loan, do you mean 50% forgivable?
Correct.
Yeah, not half of what you need, but 50. the
Some of
full
those
thing.
qualifiers is not only based on dollar amount of the project, but it's what the project entails is what qualifies it for up to 50% principal forgiveness. And luckily, I'll knock on wood if I don't jinx myself, we have hit that 50% on every project so far. So this is why we pick the projects we do, because it gives us the highest opportunity for the lowest amount of money, the lowest interest for the most amount of money.
Isn't there a limit on the 50%?
I'm sorry.
Isn't there a limit on the 50%?
I don't know. A limit as far as the total project dollar amount?
No, it's like, if we have a million, let me see. If we have $1 million project, we can get up to $500,000 for the 50%. But if it's $2 million, we're still held to the 500,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 500,000 is the max on any of these.
I thought you meant how many loans I could score the 50%.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going until they tell me to stop.
And I
Yeah,
know
good
that
idea.
about you, yeah.
Well, then how much money would you request at once? Would you request money for all of these projects at once, or would you do it phase by phase?
That's a really good question because Bruce and I have discussed this. It's not only, how much we can chase, but it's how much staff can juggle at one time, right? There's only so many projects we could have going on at one time. This is, again, why we pick the projects we do. We stagger those pump stations so they're not happening at the same time. And it becomes a manageable. So I would only chase the money associated with the projects that we could actually manage, number one, and that are the best qualifiers to get the most money for the least interest rate.
So does it, go ahead.
Would you run the risk then of losing that potential lower interest at the amount of forgiveness?
We
if you
do.
Waited.
It's a timing thing. And another good question is that the invite letters come to us and we compete for those loans. And then when that money's gone, that money's gone. You wait for the next allotment from the feds. So we can pass this up, but the next funding opportunity, those qualifiers may be different. So when we see these 50% forgivable opportunities, you really try hard to be able to chase those. You never know when that's going to be cut off. In this instance, most recently, Bruce and I we had to attend a board call to be able to promote our project. And they were very excited about the project. They said, you've hit all the pulse points. These are exactly the kind of projects we want. You've addressed your disaster recovery. You've addressed the projects that are supporting critical infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. And they're ready to give us $3 million. They even had another team of guys there that were over a pot of money that was $3 million separate from the pot of money we were asking for. And they asked them, could we tap into that to give them the full amount that they're asking for? And they said, yes. So it was a matter of saying, okay, we got that part locked down. Now let's take it to council, see if they want us to move forward on this. So the feds have been saying to the states, you're not getting this money out to the hands and getting it spent fast enough. So in a lot of respects, they're ready to give the money. You got to fight for it. But once you have made, there's multiple phases you go through. But once you have been past all those phases and you're down to the final ones, you got to be ready to go. Because if you're not, they give the money to somebody else and you're out. So we only have so much time to be able to get through the vetting process, bring it to you, get a yes, and go back and say, we'll take it.
If I can, on these projects, almost all of them were at the point saying, are you going to raise rates to be able to pay back the loan? And so that's why we're trying to have the conversation now.
It's like a mortgage. You have to be able to demonstrate to them your ability to pay it back. And when you get into the larger projects like this, they don't dictate what the rate increase has to be, but it has to be part of your application, your next phase of application saying, we can pay this back. And here's how we're going to do it.
And when Lori presents, I told her that she far exceeded my expectations. She's looked at all of our cash flow, everything, to be able to say, we will need to have this much money in this year, maybe when we're doing design, and then there's a bigger blip, and that's when we start paying off the note. So we will, I think that we've got a very good model to work from to give you an idea of what those increases might be. But in talking about, whether we go forward on this project or this project, I think that we need to also keep in consideration, for example, with the project that we're talking about, bring the water from the springs, through the system, then down to the city. There might be multiple projects in that, but you can't do two. I guess you can, but if you do two and you don't do the other two, you don't have the problem solved. And so, we kind of look at them, systemically when we're saying what we want to try to put together. But just the fact that several of these projects that we're working on and would like to get a nod that we understand worth it, we want to go ahead, we will raise rates if we have to, puts us in a position to pay back half the principal. So we think that's worth chasing, and
My understanding is the rates right now don't quite cover our costs. And maybe they do, but we haven't raised them in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So do we have to have a rate increase before we get this money released to us?
You don't have to have a rate increase, but you have to commit to raising rates to set the rates at where they need to be to pay them back. But Lori's got an excellent presentation on this. So we're happy to continue answering questions regarding projects. But we're kind of getting into the funding. So
I have one question. It's kind of project oriented, but it's one of the long range phase 3 projects. And I'm just curious about the resiliency aspect of the 101 water line. There's a stretch there that is impossible to do resiliency on. And I suppose this would come once the engineers have a chance to look at it. But I just want to make sure they do.
and what stretch are you talking about?
A 101 bridge primarily, but also that entire length. That's a washout area. And it would be impossible to create any sort of water line or on the bridge area that's not going to wash out.
He's talking about crossing the bridge.
Yeah, Sam, I know, dealt with this before when you're dealing with passes. And in areas like that, if it looks like it would be a problem, you can do a subaqueous crossing. And a lot of times it's actually an easier project to do. So it would be possible to do those. And I think we have a subaqueous crossing now under the First Street Bridge. The pipe is not connected to the bridge and it's not laying on the bottom of the estuary. I don't know how deep it is, but it is actually under it. So I think that we could do a subaqueous crossing there.
Well, that's what I'm asking, is just to make sure that the engineers look at all the possibilities. Another thing that I've heard is to make sure you have intersections on either side of the bridge that make it really easy to repair. That's another way to do it. So, but yeah, just a question for 23, it looks like.
Yeah, I think that some sort of a directional bore in those areas would make the most sense.
Okay.
And also, Karen, talk about the new pipe. It's much more flexible and
The HDPE.
Yeah, the HDPE.
Talked a little bit about that on, let's see here. Take you back to slide 9. So the HDPE, as I mentioned, is the high-density polyethylene pipe. It's what we used up at the Ash Street water line replacement. This pipe some people call it a flex pipe because it can tolerate the movement of the ground and or shaking, if you will, of an earthquake. And it doesn't have the response of, breaking like some of our other, obviously the concrete pipe, but even PVC. And so PVC is a vinyl polymer product, and the HDPE is actually it's a thermoplastic, and it's made out of petroleum. So that's where you're getting your movement tolerance in this pipe. There's been extensive research on this pipe. It's a pipe that my predecessor said he's seen used in a lot of the major cities, because especially down in the southern area where you get a lot of earthquakes, and it's because it has been proven to be much more flex tolerant.
I think
And
you were
so-
saying too that the joints somehow are
Yeah,
flexible.
they're fused, and so it's not like our current pipe joints where you have pieces. It's actually fused together. There's a machine that does it. And so it's like one solid piece of pipe, which gives it greater strength as well. You don't have the joints that could be compromised. It's
Okay.
pretty interesting.
Yep, that's nice. Let's move on unless there's more questions.
I have one question. Are we under any DEQ orders or requirements or anything to do any of this work? Is there any, we have any warnings or anything?
Other than the parts of our master plan that DEQ requires us to have plans for, no, there's no current mandate on anything concerning the overflow or otherwise right now.
Yeah.
Okay, ready to get into the funding?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, Ms. Laura, you're up.
Me, Mr. Mayor, counselors. Okay, we're gonna discuss water utility first. Slide 2, so just showing of where we're gonna be headed this evening. Talk a little bit about what our rates are now and where we could potentially be going. Talk about the baseline and model assumptions that are used in this rate analysis. And then we'll look at the actual rate projections that came out of that. Slide 3. So some history, our last water rate increase was March 2018, almost 3 years ago. We raised the rate to $24.20 from $17.94, and that was a 35% increase. $6.26 additional each month, and that's at current rate. $24.20 is the base rate for a 3/4 inch meter, and we have a rate of $6.05 per 100 cubic feet over an allowance of 400. Again, that's a residential 3/4 inch rate. So funding future operating and debt service. Projections of revenue and expense for the next 10 years show a need for incremental increases to fund just only normal operations, and that would be without any debt or loans. As we all know, expenses to operate go up every year for payroll, equipment, materials, and supplies. Okay, slide 4. Major capital projects are being deferred for lack of funding, and rate increases are necessary to fund the debt service on future loans that will finance projects that our Public Works Director just discussed with you. Okay. We get into the baseline requirements.
And and then we'll get into the assumptions that we used. We started with a baseline requirement as a jumping off point so that we could then add in other items such as the debt and inflation indexes. So to get our baseline requirement, we start with a baseline revenue, and we used our, one thing, I have to give a shout out to Carolyn, because I called her and I said, can you come sit with me and take a look at all of this stuff? And she was great, and we agreed on, I think, most everything. And frankly, I had fun working with you, so that's good. The utility rate model was designed by FCS Group as part of the Public Works Committee. They had a project where they were looking at different scenarios, and I know you all remember this. There were 5 scenarios about how to restructure our rates. Carolyn was very involved in that. And so this utility rate model, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's not uncomplicated. But okay, so you guys decided on scenario 5, which took away the additional cubic foot allowances and want to just that anybody who uses 400 cubic feet of water over 400 will pay for the additional 100 cubic feet. And so from that, we were able to realize an increase in revenue without changing the base rate of 2420 and the per 100 consumption factor. So we are benefiting from that now. And so that is what we're using as a starting off point, because the rate model, we're able to take the data from our Cassell accounting software and dump it in there and then get various, rates based on that consumption. So what I did was, to get the baseline, I took March 2019 to February 20, and I put that data into the utility rate model. And I avoided the COVID months because that's why I stopped February 2020. So this is a full 12-month scenario. And then that was the starting off point where I could see what the revenue would be generating based on that consumption level. And it was $1.3 million. So that's how I came up with the baseline revenue and the baseline consumption. From there, we need to understand what our baseline personnel costs and material costs are. And that I was getting information from Karen on, because she knows what she needs to operate better than I do. And so with that input, we came up with the baseline and our jumping off point. So maybe if we move to the next slide, we can see how that works out. So what does the utility rate model do? So if we have the baseline revenues of 1.3 million, we add the personnel costs, the materials and services costs, and we get the total baseline. Then we add inflation and debt service to that, and then we get the total revenue requirement each year, beginning in 2022. So that would be end up for that next year using those baseline dollars. Once we know the revenue requirement, we go back to the utility rate model and derive the new base rate requirement for each year. Because then it will tell us, because we put the revenue required in there, or we know what we need, and we keep ratcheting up the rate till we get that revenue amount. So it tells us what it is we need. Okay, slide 7. Is everyone kind of with me so far?
Well, you do, your assumptions say the baseline requirements do not include any debt, but on your previous page, it says plus debt service.
Okay, back to slide 6.
Yeah,
My baseline is the revenues, personnel, materials, and then that makes my total baseline.
yeah,
That's what we need to
That's what-
run operation,
moving on now, okay.
right?
Not what you're gonna need in the future.
No, but then in 2022, we add the inflation and the debt service.
All right.
And then we see where the gap is and what we have to raise in addition to the 1.3 million.
Okay,
Okay. 7. So then we talk about assumptions because, when Carol and I were talking, we both looked at each other and said, well, we don't have a crystal ball, so in order to plan for the future, you have to make some assumptions. Using historical data, you can kind of derive what those assumptions should be. In budget committee, we're always striving to get a contingency of 20%. So I think you're familiar with that figure. Just to reiterate, the baseline requirement amounts did not include any debt until we move forward through the years. From there, we included operational costs, and debt service requirements, starting in 2022 and ending 2031. Slide 8. The other assumptions are that personnel costs are assumed to increase 7% each year. Goods and services to increase 5% each year. Debt service costs were based on the cost of the phase 1, 2, and 3 projects presented tonight and estimated at a 1% interest rate over a 30-year period. Debt service costs for the meter project are approximately $16,000 per year for 20 years. We're already committed to that.
Say that again.
The meter module project,
Okay.
committed to that debt annual debt service. Slide 9. The annual debt service costs for phase 1, 2, and 3 are estimated as follows. Phase 1 will be $21,550 per year, and those payments start 2023. So when you look at the rate projection toward the end of this report, you'll see a little bump in the revenue requirement. We need a little bit more that year than we did maybe in the prior year, just because those payments go online at that time. And then they start to even out. And then you'll see that after a while, we don't need to raise revenue at all to cover debt unless we're adding new debt. But if we just stick with the debt we have here, you'll see that you don't need to keep increasing because you've already built it into the rate. Phase 2 projects are $124,000 per year, and those payments start 2025. And the final phase 3 one is debt service is $232,500 per year. And the first payment starts 2027. So, obvious, but contingency increases each time expenditures increase. So that creates another bump too. So the more expenditures you have, the more contingency you'll have based on that 20%. Page 10. As a result of the baseline revenue projected to be more than the baseline expenses, there is $41,659 each year that accumulates as ending fund balance. So that's outside of the rate increases.
On these, you know how long it took me to get this. So maybe you want to ask if there's any questions after each assumption. If anybody has a question on what we're talking about.
Okay. Ready? You want me to back up at all?
I think it just, when you start talking about the assumptions that you plugged in,
I'm talking about the assumptions right now.
that's what I'm saying. But after each one, ask the question, I think.
Maybe this was a good place to ask the question. The assumptions up to this point, so perfectly clear. This assumption on the 41,659. Would you go through that and explain that part? Why does that accumulate
Okay,
as an ending fund balance? Is that just a built-in number that we started with? We just keep it?
the difference in the baseline revenues versus expenses. And so we're not carrying that forward into the rate projection. We're just leaving it leftover, like leftover money. And so it does accumulate each year.
You're not trying to draw everything down to zero.
No,
There's money left over and we're saying, okay, that will go in an account.
right.
On a line item. And then we say, this is how much we need this year, rather than moving that money in and getting closer to zero. So it allows us to build up a fund balance.
So you're building up a fund balance. So in other words, in 2 years, it would be 82 or 83,000, whatever. What do you do with, what are you planning to do with that particular fund balance then?
She'll get to it.
Okay.
Well, we could factor it in, just like what I'm about to say for the next paragraph. There is, because we didn't use beginning fund balances in this projection. So there's also an audited beginning fund balance as of July 1, 2020 of $397,887 that's not factored in. But we could use that as well as the 41,000 to reduce the revenue requirements and slightly lessen a few years of increases. Or it could be put in a reserve account for a future use for vehicles or other rolling stock.
What's happening is that we didn't try to use the rosiest picture by pulling every penny that might be left over and use it to pay off. We're taking, like, if there's $387,000 in the beginning, we're not going to use that. We're saying, so the rate picture that you're looking at is dealing just with the cost or whatever for that year, instead of having, these funds go in artificially offset for a certain period of time. When we talk about the budget, if there's money that's there, you can decide where it would go. But we didn't want to assume the rosiest situation.
Okay. Item 11. So after including the debt service requirements, there was a deficit created, which is the revenue that would need to be raised in the form of a rate increase, as summarized on the following page. So here's where we get to the final rate projection. And these are fiscal year ending 2022. And so you can see the familiar $24.20 that we would start the year with. And then we would add the operational cost to the rate and the debt service cost. The operations cost is 72 cents. Debt service cost is 25 cents. And the base rate then would go to $25.70 a month. And the per cubic foot cost is $6.29 per cubic feet. Increase is a 4% increase from the prior, from the 24-20. Revenue raised is $1,403,657, and that covers all of your expenses. And you can see down there where I have the baseline of 1.3 million. When we move to 2023, you see I have a comment down here, phase 1 complete. That's because that's when the loan payments start to come in. 2022, you're constructing. Interest is accruing on your drawdowns, and that is factored into this projection. But the real annual payment doesn't start until your project is complete. So that's where you see, we have a rate increase of 8%. And the debt then cost has gone up to 58 cents. That was a smaller project. That was the seismic, is that right? So because that was a smaller project, it's not, a significant hit here. You're going up 8%. So then as you progress through the years, 2024, we've got the phase 2 coming online, but you don't have to make a payment yet. You don't make a payment until 2025. But you are accruing interest, so it's, maintaining itself pretty much even from the prior year. 2025, that's what I said here, like loan. Phase 2 is complete, so then you've got another uptick of 14% to cover the debt service on phase 1 and phase 2 combined. How much was this project? It's the phase 3 one is the big one. So that's where you're going to see your largest increase, which I show you on 2027 that year. When phase 3 becomes complete, you see you have to raise rates 16%. Your debt cost is $3.11. But at that point, your projects are complete and you have raised rates enough to cover that debt service so that if you just have these loans only, going forward, 2028, you don't have to raise additional funds because you've already done that. And so things start to even out at that point. Starting in 2028, you see there's a 4% and then a 5, 5, 5, and it's about even then. It would be even then all the way out unless you add more debt.
So essentially, the debt is already built into the rate, and you don't need to add any.
Correct. Yes.
I have a question. On your debt service, is that principal and interest?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, slide 13. This was just to show you the dollar amount of the increase every year. A cup of coffee costs or. So that's what that is.
Lori, are those, when we're going across, those are cumulative, so it's,
Yes.
okay, so year 2 is 97 cents plus 206. And then that is plus 205, correct?
Yes.
There, okay.
Yeah.
Right, so make that clear.
Questions? Anyone? So other funding methods on slide 14, we just wanted to bring up that there are other ways of funding these projects have been brought up. And I know Bruce already spoke about this earlier. So it's food and beverage tax, transient room tax, and potentially grants.
So your model assumed all of this would be debt. You haven't taken advantage of any grants or
That's right.
forgiveness or.
That's right.
So this would be the worst case scenario then, if that's what
It's
you're,
very conservative.
Yeah.
Don't you agree, Carolyn?
Yes.
yeah.
Also, it assumes you're gonna spend the 20% contingency every year, which hopefully you would not be in that situation.
Just to jinx it, let's not call it the worst case scenario. Because there's always a worse.
There's always something worse.
There's always a worse case.
Don't rain on my parade.
Yeah, that's right. But it is conservative, as she says.
Lori, I have a question on the meter module. Did you factor in the full 650,000 loan that we qualified for, or the amount that we know we will be spending?
I may have done the whole thing,
And,
or maybe not.
when I asked you earlier, you said you didn't take off the 50%. So even that one is very conservative. So
Yeah,
I think instead of 604, we're going to pay 302, but the model assumed we were going to pay 604.
yeah.
So, Aaron, the whole city's gonna be looking to you to get lots of good, cheap money.
Well, I think they're doing a great job already. This, and again, with the 1% and what we're kind of hedging our bets on is that the infrastructure grants that could be coming to stimulate the economy. I remember my last job, they created a bogus project for us just so that there would be $1 million project in our city. And they had an architect come in and do some landscaping designs and all that stuff, and everybody hated every aspect of it. But somehow there was $1 million injected into the economy. So if you have your own real projects, they like those.
Or those that we have shovel ready and that we can say we're ready to go, because that's what they look for, is money that can be handed out and utilized within a period of time. That we want to have things staged up and ready to go.
These were a grant to do that project.
Okay, very good.
Are we doing wastewater too?
Yes.
Yeah. Wastewater. Similarities here because we took the same approach as with water.
Prize.
So we're going to talk about basically the very same things with just different numbers. The last wastewater rate increase also was March 2018. Rate went from $24.94 base rate to $26.32. And that was a 5% increase. So it was $1.36 additional each. That rate is for a 3/4 inch meter. And 100 cubic feet price is $6.58. So again, projections of revenue and expense for the next 10 years show incremental increases to fund normal operations. And expenses go up every year, as I said, with water. Get some of these projects funded, and we think rate increases are the way to do that. Slide 5. Same modeling approach. Again, I used, I was able to get the sewer rates because that model wasn't meant to handle the sewer rates, but I went in and put all the rates in and just changed all the data in there to make the Excel spreadsheet work for sewer as well. So that was a handy thing to do. And so I was able to come up with the same baseline data that I have for water. And so when we put the our baseline revenues or our baseline expenses in this case scenario, we needed to generate more revenue than we're currently getting from the utility rate model when I went in and used the non-COVID months of consumption. So we had to earn more money than we're making now. To the water fund that I think will come in at 1.3. We're not going to raise 1.6 million like this year. So what we had to do is we had to get additional revenues right from the get-go in 2022 from operations. And you'll see that in the rate projection when we go there. There's a big increase just for operations because we're not raising the amount of money based on the projected baseline expenses. 7, again, the assumptions here are all identical to water. Percent and is assumed to not be spent each year. Baseline requirements don't include any debt until we start adding that debt later to see the effects of that change. And then we added the costs and debt service to get that projection to include debt. Again, the personnel costs are assumed to increase 7% each year. Materials and services costs are assumed to increase 5% each year. That service costs were based on Haystack, Midway, and Siusla pump station projects and estimated at a 3% interest rate over a 30-year period. And then on slide 9, you can see estimated debt service per year for those 3 projects. Comes to $42,815. So much smaller projects here.
I have a question. Why is this estimated at 3% interest over 30 years rather than a 1%? Are they not eligible for the same grant?
Yeah, but we never know when that 1% is going to end. And the loans go anywhere from 1% to 3%, and the 3% can be extended to 40 years instead of 30. But the ones I've been chasing are the 1% as long as they exist. No longer be available to us.
So this is possibly a 1%, but more could be a 3%. So you're just going more conservative.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys were to allow this, then we know that the ones that we're chasing right now qualify for that 1%. But by the time I take these forward, if the 1% is no longer being offered, then most likely I'd have to chase a 3%.
Karen? Are we not applying through DEQ for those?
Are we what?
Are we applying through DEQ?
Yes.
It's a different loan source
Yeah,
for the water and the waste.
They have different interest rate structures.
Okay.
they do. But what we do is we get a letter of invite letting us know what they're offering to us. And we send in a letter of intent saying, well, what we're going to be pursuing.
Right now, the interest rate is 3 times higher than what we can get for water projects.
And again, a lot of it is the qualifiers that these projects hit that tell you if the 1% you qualify for or the 3% you qualify.
And this is one of those projects that because the funding is a state function, that if the state gets funds that they're looking for shovel-ready projects, these will be teed up well. But fortunately, the numbers that we're looking at are much lower. The 6 million versus 17 million for the total. So we're actually asking for less money at a higher interest rate, but also potentially up to 40 years.
After including the debt service requirements, there was a deficit created that we needed to fill, raising revenue to close the gap. And that's what you see then here on the slide where it says wastewater rate projections. And I've kind of circled some of these pertinent items. And what I was saying before earlier, in fiscal year end 2022, you can see the cost of operations jumped $4.61 because the baseline expenses needed to be met with a higher revenue stream than what we're currently receiving right now under the current rate. And you can see the debt is $1.36. So that brings us in year 2022 to a base rate of $32.29. And the rate per 100 cubic feet goes to $8.07. And the increase is 22.7%. Revenue raised is $1,741,872. And that was using a baseline of the 1.6 million. And you can see all projects do become complete by year 2023. And so that you've satisfied, you need an additional 27 cents for year 2023 to satisfy all of that debt service total that I just mentioned to you, $42,000 per year. And then you see how things start to even out because you're not adding any additional debt. So after that, just a 5%.
And to correct me if I'm wrong on this, Lori, but when you look at the debt, it's over 2 years. It's $1.3627. So it's maybe what, $1.60 or something is what we would be adding based on the projects that we're doing. For water, they were much higher than that.
But you're also adding quite a bit for operations.
Right. Well, the operations, I think partly is because we've not done a rate increase for 3 years. So I think we're catching up to a degree on that. So I think that that's separate. And we would, if we don't do any project, we would still have to collect the 22%. And the reason we haven't done any of these is that we knew this was coming. We knew this decision point was coming. And so we stayed on the same rate level that we had instead of doing, multiple rates. And so now we're looking at what the numbers are.
So if I'm reading this right, if you add the proposed increase for the water and the proposed increase for wastewater for fiscal year beginning July 1st, for a ratepayer would pay about $6.84 more on their rates. Is that right?
I have to look to Lori on that.
Yeah, the first year for wastewater would be $5.97, and then we add that 97 cents in,
Yeah.
right?
$6.84.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Lori, if we got the grant for the generators for these projects, obviously that would lower this significantly. And then if we get confirmation that they'll give us the 1% loan instead of 3%, that would also
Yes,
offset that.
yes.
And Karen, the money that you're chasing, as you say, and I think that we've been told we're relatively assured that we will get for the generators. How much is that 160,000?
What, for generators?
Yes.
See, I got two at 47,000 and I've got one at 67. Tell you here.
There's just like $170,000 right there, just those,
Right.
it would come off the project cost. If we, once we get those. Okay, I think
Yeah.
we got the order of
We got
magnitude. We know what it is.
We're going to go ahead right now. Are you comfortable that you can do, in the next 2 years, do phase 1 and phase 2 of the water and all of the wastewater?
5 years.
Huh? No, 2 years.
The water.
For
Well, I'm saying
wastewater.
phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah, he's just saying the
Oh,
first
yeah,
two
sorry.
phases.
My bad.
That's correct.
In those 2 years, you're going to have everything going. Phase 3 comes a little later. And you're
What's critical
comfortable.
about the phase 3 is that assessment they have, the engineering firm has to do about that tank site.
with phase 3, and that includes the line 101.
Yep.
That is going to be a game changer, that we will have water supply resilient all the way down to there, and then a backup supply. And one of the things that I look at, Sharon was talking in her presentation about the north end. The water from the north end goes through downtown and all these other areas. And any place there that breaks means there's no water going across under the bridge and getting to the north end. And that's why we want to have a line that's not going to be terribly long. It runs along 101 and then into that tank. Because the north end is not, I would say, well protected. And we think that that's a critical part. And then going down to the south end will put us in a much better position to, you know, we have a redundant system right now, or a redundant line in the S curves. But if the S curves moves, we don't have that redundancy anymore.
My co-pilot Ouija board tells me $206,000 for the 4 generators we're chasing.
Okay.
So that would come off if that's granted by FEMA.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of summarize it from my own thinking and see if I'm in the zone here. We should approve of moving forward with these rate increase program, but we might get a lot of help from Karen being a wizard and getting us grants that will reduce it, but we can't get those grants unless we approve the rate increase program, correct?
22.
The loans, yeah, not the grants.
No.
Loans require you to show payback ability, not the grants.
Okay, well, I'm kind of putting that into the one term, but a grant
Okay.
is something else that could be found that would help reduce the increase of every year or something like that.
Yeah.
Sam, can I just make a clarification? I don't think that they're asking us to set these rate increases in place right now. I think it's, are you going to increase the rates to be able to pay back?
Yeah.
And I think that's the step we're at.
But we have to kind of make this commitment that we're going to do
Yes.
rate increases
That's
at
the same
some
thing.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Yes.
That the loans have that commitment.
That's what we're looking for.
Basically, it'd be Lori's presentation attached to the, her graphs attached to the application. And then some sort of a council minutes agenda, something showing that you guys have accepted that going forward.
And then on an ongoing basis, we look at a different rate increase and what, we're not locked into these increases. If our expenses have gone down or revenues come up.
Right.
That's right.
So we can make those adjustments. Ongoing, as long as we commit to a program.
Yeah.
We're going to raise rates. Here's what it looks like now.
Yeah.
We're not locking into that. Okay.
And what we're trying to do is put something together that the news will hopefully always be good, because we've erred on the side of not good.
Right.
And so like when these generators come in, the projects and the debt service will be dropped by $200,000.
Yeah, and it looks concerning to me when I look at the current rate line on the projections and you see in a 10-year span, it's doubled. Essentially, that is very dramatic, and that's going to be hard for a lot of folks to accept. And then we can make the argument that it might not be that much because we're going to get Karen's magic. But the other thing that I think we should really consider is how can we use the promise that has always been kind of in the air that the initial room tax dollars were going to help the residents with some of the utilities. And as I've been listening, one concept that comes to mind is maybe some sort of granting system within the city for low-income folks that they could request. I don't know. That's a future discussion. It's not necessary right now, but it's an idea that might help some relief. That wouldn't be directly from the general fund into this program. So. Sorry, I didn't mean to kill the room, but.
I make comments? Am I allowed?
Yeah, Carolyn has a comment I think would be good for us to hear.
It's kind of the basis of the comment that I sent to council about my concern regarding the fact that we have a proposed plan in place here with some great projects that Karen's been chasing her magic money on. And when we looked at Lori's numbers for water, we got to, I think it was 2027 or 2028, where we didn't see any more additional debt service payments being needed. However, there are still a lot of water master plan projects, a lot of dollars worth of water master plan projects that haven't really been factored into this particular analysis. And that's kind of where my concern comes. The one that I sent to you is like, how do we handle that? Because really you're talking about, there's going to probably be additional projects that have to go on top of this. So you're talking about even a larger escalation in rates. And I think perhaps looking at maybe a different option, at least considering that we're possibly, like, I'm totally behind phase 1 and phase 2. I think those totally make sense. But because that gets you water within 72 hours, you know, in the event of a catastrophic event or a non-catastrophic event, any type of event. But should there be at that point a balance between working projects that are in the master plan, that is working on the lines that are in town that are aged, that are going to continue to age during this time frame? Are we compromising some sort of replacement plan for those lines while we're going for the tank replacement and the line on 101? I think that's something that council needs to think about, if there is value in considering an option of that approach, as opposed to just going for all of the resiliency items first. And then, as in, I don't want to say as an afterthought, but afterwards going for maintaining the infrastructure that we already have in the ground. So that was kind of the crux of my comment that I said to council. It really didn't come to mind to me when we were in Public Works Committee. It came to mind when I saw these. And I kind of, you know, had the same thought that Sam just expressed in terms of seeing the escalation of costs. So that's something that I would hope that council would kind of think about. Is there another option that might serve the comprehensive needs of the community in terms of the water and wastewater in a better way?
And Carolyn, something that we kicked around a little bit is that if we do a little bit, do some of the work in the city and maybe set, and I don't know what the number might be that would make it effective. Maybe it's 100,000, you know, a year or something, and then combine it in these loans so that we're doing that all along, but it won't be, you know, a huge hit on the difference of these numbers, but we would actually start those projects earlier.
Sorry, go ahead.
So that something like that might be a possibility, because you're right. When you go all the way out and, you know, it starts looking like zeros, that's fine. We still have work to do.
Right.
But yeah, what we're identifying is the projects that we think are the biggest impact, you know, including the distribution system and everything going up to the spring.
The greatest risk.
Yeah.
And that, I think, like I said, I think phase 1 and phase 2 make total sense. That's the lines from the springs, that's getting the seismic valves installed. That's everything up to the new capability, that is a new tank and the backbone down 101. And I understand the the fact that you're able to get some of these low interest loans, principal forgiveness is very attractive. And it's a great way, as you said, to get the most bang for your buck. But the question is, do we have all those bucks to handle that bang for the bucks? Plus making sure that we're taking care of the infrastructure and all of those other projects that the master plan called out as things that we should be doing within the next 20 years. You know, you're right, that sounds like a great idea in terms of, you know, rolling them into some of the other ones, but I just think we need to make sure that we're not focusing on these projects in a vacuum without recognizing that there's a whole nother set of projects out there that really needs to be considered, and they're going to cost the community as well.
And I'd like to find a way to do it incrementally and start sooner. I think that you and I differ on the importance of the tank,
Yes,
because if we put all those lines in and the tank fails, those lines don't do us any good. So to me, that whole thing is a system to make that, to be able to say that we've got water in 3 days or whatever, that tank needs to be there. So.
I think we differ on that. I think we also differ on the 101 backbone. I see that. I see where it's a redundancy capability, but it's also a new capability that we have that is being proposed as being worked on before we handle the, you know, some of the infrastructure issues on the pipes or the lines that are already in the ground in town that are supplying all of us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I have the same reservations, and living on the north end, I see the advantage of having the backbone paralleling 101. But as I look at our other needs, I'm wondering, are we building redundancy that maybe won't even be needed while our existing systems are deteriorating around us? I would like to make sure that we've got sufficient revenues to keep the existing infrastructure with replacements and improvements. And if we don't take away from that to build a parallel redundant line that's only there for serious emergency. I understand the benefit of it, but I also understand the need to maintain a good operating system for forever. And I actually already questioned Trevor and Karen on the need for that, their view of the need for that. And I don't question that it would be valuable. I question whether it rises to a level higher than the need to maintain the existing system. And I'm not seeing the dollars in here other than this, 5% increases. And that's just to keep things going as they are. And we are, as we go now, we are replacing and improving systems. So it's not like we're doing nothing except operating. So there are enhancements there. But I just want to make sure that before we commit to a full-blown phase 3, I think the concrete water tank needs to be replaced. But my concern and question is building pipelines from the north end to the south end as a redundant system, having a higher priority than maintaining and improving the existing system. So we've got time to address that, but I would like to see that addressed.
I mean, so an option that perhaps takes that phase 3 and shifts that to the right a few years, and in its place, when in the time of phase 3 is to maybe take a chunk of that other $13 million worth of projects for the existing infrastructure, and we probably wouldn't get a favorable loan on that, but you know, have staff determine what is the best or the highest need in that section and kind of work on that. And then, you know, there were, Bruce, I think in your opening comments, you talked about other possible funding methods and, you know, some of them taking some time to investigate. And perhaps moving that phase 3 a little bit to the right, or at least a portion of that could tie into that investigation of those other funds. You know, something to think about is the two general obligation bonds that the city is paying right now. One of them retires in 2025 and one in 2027. I mean, we're paying for our sewer system with the general obligation bond. Is that something that could be developed for these enhancements for seismic? Then you pay the line down 101. The other thing that we're doing for the wastewater treatment plant payment is we're actually taking about $160,000 a year from the general fund that we're transferring to debt service to pay a portion of that wastewater treatment plan general obligation bond. That goes away in 2025. So, you know, there's some potential there for some money that we're now committing to utilities in the form of debt service that we might want to think, well, maybe we just continue that, but apply it to one of these other debt service things that we're going to take on for these improvements or these upgrades and maintenance that we need to perform to make sure our system stays operational.
No, yeah, all those things are possible.
I comment on that. Our water system, like our wastewater system, should have redundancy, should have a backup and a redundancy to it. And we don't have that. Our pump stations do. We have backup generators and some backups to those generators. And that is a key part of how the function of our movement of sewage. Our water system is not set up that way. So I'm conflicted about exactly the point you made, Mike. But I also see the importance of that line out on the highway and what the ramifications of not having that redundancy. This is why we chomped away at it a little at a time, putting our lines back in on the S curve so that we could get water to the south end of town, have that redundancy. We play a little bit of a Russian roulette by not doing that. And if we don't recognize that, and the time comes where we have a catastrophic event, or even something like what happened last night on the highway down in Arch Cape, we have a hillside give way, then I envision someone coming back to me and or Bruce saying, it's identified in your master plan, yet you took no action, or you didn't feel that was more important than addressing your neighborhood lines where you can isolate it down to a more impacted audience versus your entire population. So that's how I think of this. I understand it looks like we're building a whole brand new parallel line. But again, that action kind of covers more than just one facet of the infrastructure. The major issue that we have on the north end where we couldn't get water there. It's a more direct route. It resolves that issue. We have our seismic valves and we're in good shape. And then we work our way down the highway to the south end with that pipe. I can do exactly what we're doing now with Pacific and Gogana, where we had the blowout last year. And the budget committee gave me funds to be able to replace that stick of pipe. We already know it's compromised to the level that it needed replacement. And so they honored that. And we can do that throughout town. The good news is our leak detection company that we had come in for 2 years, the majority of those leaks were not on our mains. They were on service lines. And so I look at, that's the magnitude of importance that I'm constantly weighing, which goes before the other when I look at the total infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm surprised that on the leaks, only 20 years or something on the mains.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that, again, we play a little Russian roulette with having infrastructure so aging. But is that greater importance than the ramifications of not having redundancy in our water system like we do our sewer system?
I don't see this as an either or. I just see it as a matter of not losing focus on our day-to-day operations and
absolutely
keeping everybody supplied with water while things are going well. And I think if we're truly conservative here and we are successful on getting the grants, then we may be able to use the schedule we have for debt to go ahead and meet phase 3.
Mhm.
My concern is that everything's gonna be more expensive than what we say it's gonna be. And I'm not saying we don't do all of phase 3. I'm just saying that I can see portions of it being pushed out a couple of more years. But I don't want us to starve our existing system in order to get that redundancy.
I think,
Just want to be cognizant of that.
I think that, you know, from the public works side, that we look at what do we need to get water to most of the people most of the time? And replacing some lines in neighborhoods and those kind of things. And if you notice, we've been putting valves in so that we can isolate certain areas, so that we can move water around or whatever. If, for our standpoint, if there's a line on 101, anything can happen down in the city. And then we can valve, and then that can go ahead and supply whoever's not immediately impacted. So our ability, in my opinion, to serve most of the best serve the people is provided by a redundant line more than a replacement. Now, if we got a line that we know is blown and we don't have that we know of, but if there's something like that, you have to take care of it for sure. But the best way for us right now to say that we can take care of people the most is with a redundant line. So that's why I think you're seeing that recommendation that high.
Well, I think we definitely need to say, yes, we're going to go with this. They're all targets, they're all estimates. And something we haven't talked about this time, and that is who's putting the load on our system that isn't paying their share.
Mhm.
And that's the day trippers. The lodgers, they pay, through the water rates and so forth. So for another day,
Yeah.
I think we've got to go back and revisit the food and beverage tax and or parking, and that dedicate that to whatever our urgent needs are. And I think that's going to be water resiliency and so forth.
I think that what we're talking,
Lose track of that.
yeah, I think that what we're talking about is, I forgot what the scope of it is, maybe, what,
For 2026.
how much was it?
Yeah, excuse me, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah,
Steve, can we turn off the screen thing? Go ahead. That slows my computer way down. So
I think what helps, what would help, I think, staff in the city is if council said, okay, for this dollar amount, we understand, the value, and that we were willing to go ahead and say, let's move forward with that. So you can say yes as you apply, but it's going to be based on budget time and, priorities at the time, those kind of things. So the big question is, do we think that this is of enough value to the city that we would need to increase costs to the people that live here for this? And, we can always modify the project list, or modify maybe that we start, funding some of these and pushing things out. But this is just, are we even in the ballpark for doing this kind of work?
Oh, I think it's been great work done. Starting with 2015, we started this whole thing of looking at master plans.
Mhm.
And it took 2 years of a lot of really serious analysis of that. So I think we ought to go. And if you want to live here and have these services and be comfortable and safe and healthy, this is what it's going to cost. And we talk about using the TLT portion general fund. One reason we didn't have to raise rates for a long time is we used those monies out of the general fund to keep the water and sewer systems going.
We are paying.
So, and we're still doing that. So we're in a new phase now. We've got to face the future.
Yeah, I think it's great work that both of you have done, or all three of you have done on this, or four, I should say.
Always got to include Carolyn.
It's great work. I think it's definitely in the ballpark.
Couldn't have done it without the committee. I mean, they have been a tremendous amount of help, especially this past year. But even from the point we first started meeting with Business Oregon and trying to work through this whole process. It's been a team effort, definitely.
Well, I commend all of you. Good work. Nice to have that model.
Mhm.
Okay, I agree with most everything. I will say that I'm with Carolyn on a little reservation with phase 3, but we have time to talk about that. So I'm sure that'll come up. As a resident, I'm not happy about raising rates because rates are rough, but I do understand the situation. And I'm putting a lot of hope and prayers that we can find the loan systems that'll help us knock this down a little bit. So, yes, I think we should proceed with this model, I guess, as a, again, knock on wood, worst case scenario kind of situation. So let's just make it better.
My concern is that I think maintenance is the most important thing. I think this redundancy is nice, but, and I appreciate all the work you've gone to. But I would like public input. It bothers me that we don't have a vote from the public about these items, because I feel they're the ones that are going to feel this, and they need to be 100% behind it. So there isn't, as I understand it, much public input, correct? It's just us deciding that this is a go or a no go.
Well, I think we're still going to have, are we still going to have public hearings or anything like that before we make final decision?
Tonight was to go ahead and put the subject on the table for you all. And we talked about what, we'd like to see as the end product on it. If whatever process you want to go through, I mean, if we're going to modify.
So that wasn't the intention, to let the public speak about this.
No, I'm sorry, but we publicized the meeting. We told people about it. We got 2 comments on it. But as far as like, we can have, public meetings, any format that you would like to see. But when we get to actually doing the rates, which is part of the budget, yes, there would be public hearings for the actual decisions. But this is for a decision about, pursuing the loans to see if we can even get the funding to do the project. But we can go through any type of a.
I'd like to at least give one meeting for public input, that people understand that that's what they're able to do.
Sure.
I think it's very healthy and will support it. We might get some good ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Robin, if we're going to do it, I have no problem with that. I would like to do it sooner rather than later, because we're already in budget season now.
We can't hurry this because it's got a timeline. I think leaving the public out is wrong.
Well, I'm not saying we leave the public out. It might be if we can have the meeting in 2 weeks. But there is there are timeframes associated with this as far as our ability to move and those kind of things.
I understand that, but it can't be the priority for a good or bad idea.
Let me ask you. The public has not been excluded. The public's been notified, made aware of this. We've been working on a master plan. We've had committees working on it. The public's involved with that. We've been doing this since 2015.
It's been going like this. All of a sudden, we have this meeting.
Well, we
And it's
reach it.
not
We
a
need a
focus.
study, and you get that point. I don't want the public saying we we don't need this kind of pipe. We really ought to use this kind of SCADA system. And, that's not their role. Our role is to maintain the system, provide service. I think we need to advise them as to what it's going to cost. I'm not arguing that. You're never going to get everybody agreeing. But I want the responsibility to say that this is what we believe needs to be done. And this is what we're proposing. And we're not keeping it a secret. It's for everybody to look at. Maybe it's a
Everybody's
result of
been
this meeting.
focused on the school.
What?
Everyone's been focused on the school and,
God, I've been focused on the school, I've been focused on this, I've been focused on a lot of things.
right,
And
let's give it one more meeting, Mike.
We can't make a decision in a work session anyway. We have to make
no,
a decision in a
Right, not
regular
vote on
session.
anything tonight.
So that would be our meeting.
all they're looking for now is this something that we think is worth pursuing? And are we following using the right tools and models and projects? And I think that we need to tell them that.
Robin,
I don't know what the public can tell us. We've spent years on this. I think we should advise them of what we've done, how we've done it, and we've done it numerous occasions. I'm not saying we go ahead and slam rates through now. I think we need to say, yes, we're moving ahead with this project. Here's the projected impacts. And before we actually do any rate increases, I think we'd do like we did before when we raised the rates a couple of years ago. We had public input. We explained what it was and how it had to be done. But we didn't just stop because of that.
And asking the public on particular projects, I think Karen will attest to, knowing that she has 5 people on her public works committee that might all have a different perspective. And if, you ask the broader community, which project, that would not be an effective way to plan your system. But asking, or at least informing them of what the investment is going to be from them, probably an important thing.
Robin, this meeting was intended to be, the public, us presenting to them, us presenting.
We have 4 people on the line.
But Robin, it was interesting because 2 people that we've never heard from before did comment tonight. And so people know about it. The usual suspects are not necessarily up on the screen, but we did put out as best that we could. I'm fine doing this again. And I just don't want to hold it off, till summer or something, because there are some timeframes in here that we want to meet. But if in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we can go ahead and have the same meeting. And I don't know if we'll have more people, maybe we will. But and again, another part of this was the fact that it was going to be recorded. We were careful about the slides and everything that we used and what we were going to tell people.
They were all really good, but even the council got a minimal amount of presentation ahead of time. We were given more information as we sat down here at the dais. We're not being given everything to look at all at once.
We can do this, as many times as you would like. That is the time frame. There's been a tremendous amount of time trying to get it to this. There were a lot of changes made when we tried to go through the rehearsals and said, that doesn't make sense timing. So there are limitations to how, what we can get done in the time frame when we say we'll meet, 2 days after another meeting. But if we want to have
That new presentation, was it up ahead of time or was it being heard and seen for the first time tonight?
No, it's virtually the same information, but some of it was downplayed in
I
that.
have 2 different packets in there,
Yes.
totally different amounts here.
I'm pretty sure the base information is all the same. We didn't change base information on this. We changed the way we presented it. And we're, again, we're not, it's very difficult to meet the schedules that we have and say, well, we'll get the packet out 2 weeks early.
But it's our information to make a decision.
Can I just make a comment? The March 10th meeting that I was saying that Windsor came out and talked to you guys, that was our capital projects that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, this has been presented before.
So that project, that presentation you got March 10th, it is the projects that we're talking about tonight.
And this is about how we would pay for it, what order we would do the projects in.
Right.
And then asking for some direction because we're being asked for, it's a pretty small commitment just to say, yes, we'll raise the rates to meet to be able to make the payments. But that needs to be done if we want to proceed. But this is the information I think that is new tonight was the information that Lori presented. And, you know, it was the information that we gave you, and I forgot what day it went out, did not change. None of those, the final slides changed at all.
It was the same packet that we had in our,
It's just the packet that we initially got and the one we got tonight were different. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I think we need some more time to consider it.
We'll work on any schedule the council directs.
The one you got tonight was my presentation. and
I'm gonna
I-
jump in here and. Hello? Okay, I want to jump in here and kind of in this, I hope, what we must, in order to do raise the rates, we must have a public meeting and a proper vote. What we're doing tonight is telling staff to move forward with the information they need, as this is a fairly positive result thing from tonight's presentation. Tonight's presentation was the presentation. This is the information that a decision needs to be made on. Granted, a lot of this was redundant to me, except for the financial aspect of Lori's presentation part. But we will have to have a public hearing and vote to proceed with any sort of rate increase. So that's my take on it, and that's what we're going to do. I do believe we need to do this before the budget process gets overly involved, because that's where a lot of the decision making is going to happen also. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any last comments on this topic before we move on?
I do have a question. Does the council have any direction for staff as far as bringing this to another meeting, to have another presentation, anything, so that we're not holding you up?
I personally don't want to go through the whole presentation again, so we can reference this. It's recorded, it's presentable, and it's all of the documentation is there. We can refer to it in a summarized meeting. Ask for folks to give their comments so that they have enough time to give their comments, either on like we do. Sorry, I'm getting kind of rummy. But again, I don't know how much time you're going to need for it to be ahead of the budget process so that it's in the budget system. So March or April might be a little too late.
Yeah, March for sure.
Right.
when do you need to get this information into the lenders?
Now,
Yeah, we could get, we could use, going soon would be good. Another thing, when Sam, you were talking about what the process would be, if you give us the direction, then we will put in the aspects of phase one, I think it is, and that's what you will expect to see in the budget. And the rate information, we'll probably be refining it as we go. That's what you would find in the budget, but that would be just for phase one. And if you are, and again, even if we get a loan, y'all can turn it down. So we're just talking about being able to go through the process. So we will go through and, try to get those loans. We'll move forward. And if you all are providing us the direction tonight, we will put in phase one for 21-22.
Right. Okay,
Phase two.
Can you do
Yeah.
phase two as well?
Yeah, part of phase two, yeah, the parts that were supposed to be in 21-22 as we presented, though, that's what we will put in the budget. We have another discussion at that time.
And wastewater as well?
Yes, yes.
Wastewater projects?
Yes.
okay then. That all sounds good. Are we done?
Now, let me,
Go to the order.
the way that this discussion has gone, I would really like to repeat what I think is the direction. I suggested a direction and I didn't see everybody's head nod. But from what you said tonight, staff will move forward with the current loans, the loans that we have set up for 21-22 projects. And trying to get those done, but those projects will be vetted again at budget time. And that is the second part. The projects that are supposed to move forward in a 21-22 timeframe, we will put into the budget. And again, you'll have another shot at being able to go ahead and discuss everything at that time. But to keep things moving, and if I heard, the majority of what you all said, that's the direction I would be asking for. If you have other direction, let me know. But I did not want to proceed and do some of those things and then have somebody say, well, we never agreed to that. So agree or disagree, whatever is fine with me, but I just want to make sure we really are on the same page with what we're supposed to do.
Well, is 21-22 enough? Or do you need the phase two? Because phase two would be up to 25, wouldn't it?
In both phase 1 and 2, there are projects identified for the 2021-22 budget.
Okay.
And so those two phases, that budget period would be in the budget.
And some of those are designed for projects that might come later.
Okay.
Because some of them get engineered one year and they constructed the next year.
But we want to be able to say we're moving forward on these projects. And there's a willingness by the council to adjust rates necessary to assure you're covered. So that you can go out and seek low-cost loans. And
That has to go with my application.
I think we need to do that.
Brandon, you good with it? Haven't heard from
I
you?
concur. I'm sorry I haven't participated, but all of you have asked very prescient questions, and I fully support what the staff is asking at this moment.
Okay.
And is not to belittle what Robin has brought up, but I believe we have acted in good faith with the public up until this point, and I fully support involving the public moving forward when it comes time to actually raising rates.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
And Robin, if there's anything you can suggest that we can do to try to get the word out more, be happy to do it because I want that to happen. I was just, for some reason, I was so proud of what these folks were going to do. I was hoping we'd have 40 names up there instead of 4.
Oh, thanks.
So it's hard to get people interested sometimes. And Sam, I do have one item for good of the order.
Okay, let's do good of the order.
Okay, first, in order to move forward with these projects, we want to renew, I guess it is, the contracts with DA Davidson and Eisler.
Oh, right.
Yeah, for our financial advisors, that sort of thing. So, and because it's all been workshopped, because we've already had contracts with them and they expired, I just want to let you know that we will be bringing those contracts for renewal for this type of work to the March meeting.
Well, the auditing services contract has expired, so we want to renew that.
Right.
Is that what you just said?
Yes, and that's
So
Eisler.
there's two different,
Right. There's Eisler, then the DA Davidson is the financial advisor.
Good.
Okay, well, you'll be seeing those on the March 2nd agenda.
Okay. Anybody else for good of the order? Okay, then, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.